Their history is totally fictional. They didn't establish that the Bible identifies the Caucasian at all. Anyway, so back to our diocesan structure. So go on, your thoughts.
Right, yeah, well, I've been, I was away from the church and I came back into the church through the diocesan structure. I went through that period where before you're confirmed, before you receive Holy Communion, I was a baptised Catholic, but I went through all of these things and became a nominal Christian. And because of my disordered previous life, I thought that was a really great place to be, was a nominal Christian. But I remember coming away from the programme and I don't remember anything he said, never talked about the real presence, never talked about contraception, never talked about sin, never talked about any moral things, no church history. It was really just pat. And we were kind of living this kind of life where we weren't what we were, but we obviously didn't feel satisfied staying where we were. So we experienced a few of these lay movements within the diocesan. Within a diocese, you also have these lay movements that are operating sometimes with the blessing of the priest or the bishop, sometimes without. So you'd have things like Opus Dei, you'd have, which we kind of, with. So there's a few of those
Franciscans,
kind of
Benedictines, Dominicans,
things like that. They would be for people who wanted to explore their faith a little bit deeper. But mostly what we found was you would have the gospel reading and then the priest would basically just tell you the gospel again, but just break it into small sections and just said, as we can see, Jesus said this. So you'd come away from church, you'd receive communion, and at the time I didn't even think of it as a I know that this communion, when we talk as Christians, this is one of the things that divides lots of Christians, but we didn't think of it as anything special. And so we were living a life, as we were, but as we grew in our faith, going to a more traditionalist parish where people seemed to take their faith more seriously, and that actually infected us.
And what was it about that parish?
It was a traditionalist parish. They had people there who, let's say, it was pious. I saw piety, which intrigued me. And I know that piety is not a substitute for a relationship with Christ, but I could see that these people were acting different to the previous previous kind of structures. But I always felt that there was something radically missing in what the flock were being fed. The priests were there almost like people working in a restaurant. They would give you your sacrament, they would hear your confession, they'd marry you and bury you, but you would not see them again.
It's the factory production line of sacramentalization.
And also
the sausage factory approach.
And also you got the impression that they didn't want to talk to you about anything else, nothing challenging, albeit they would attempt. The only kind of things that kind of intrigued me were when they were quite radical on more liberal elements, because I was naturally quite a conservative person. I thought they seemed very free to expand their popularity base to get as many people to like them as possible, and I think that was one of the most important things for them. But then,
so let's try and boil that down into let's try to boil that down into something, because what it seems that you're indicating is that there was a lack of a profound spirituality amongst the clergy, and because I think that one of the problems of the diocesan structure, and also a faith that emphasizes the sacraments to the exclusion of a wider spiritual context, is that it ends up being the sausage factory of religion. You go in, you receive your sacraments, job done, you go out. And that's what we see. We see lots of parishes where lots of Christians, their entire spirituality is to go to church. Their entire. We're having one conversation, bro. So it's all right. So it's a sausage factory version of religion that almost cultivates a lack of discipleship, because people think if they've got the sacrament, they've done their bit, the religion bit is done, and then they just go home and that's not
1 hour a week where you would have any participation in anything remotely religious. And we felt as a family, when my wife and I were when I say born again, I consider myself a born again Catholic, not in the sense that, because we understand as apostolic Christians, born again is baptism, but there's also a process that people go through when they are passing through, they're repentant of their sins and they're trying to move closer to God. So me and my wife were going through that. But once we had children, and I realised, because I come from a very damaged kind of base because of pornography, alcohol.
Yeah.
We realised that we didn't want our children to be who we were.
Yeah.
But we also didn't want them to be who we were within the Christian thing there because nobody was interested.
Yeah.
This was not sufficient enough to pass on. It was of no value. It would have been no value to my parents and
that is the point. A lot of the Catholic structures of parish systems and dioceses, they're not really offering anything to their surrounding society.
Sure.
They're just meeting up on a Sunday, and maybe once in the middle of the week. And I don't think that marries up well to what actually the New Testament teaches in terms of its value system. Because when you look at the New Testament scriptures, it talks about people sharing life together. Talks about people living in one another's homes, eating together, breaking bread together, praying together, listen, with a zeal for the apostolic teaching, the prayers, the breaking of bread and the fellowship. And that requires that Christians actually live close to one another. And I think one of the reforms that needs to happen within the diocesan structure is actually to get Christians to move literally closer together. To live life with one another in a much closer remit, in a bulge, in a bulging community.
This might help in just because I'll try and speed through to where I am now. But we were invited by a friend who saw maybe us light a candle or something and thought, well, maybe they want to hang around. That was just a very small thing, but it meant a lot to somebody. And they invited us to join this Catholic family group. We went to the Catholic family group, and there was about 6 or 7 families who were all believing in it. They actually talked about God and how God played a part in their lives. And from that group, it lit a fire in us and a hunger for more. And then just to tie it back to what you were saying, so after a long journey, we finally found other families who felt similarly to us, and similar to what you said. We felt that we were homeschoolers, we're open to life. And once you do that and you give everything to God, He changes your life. And I think being open to life is something huge. I really, really do. But anyway, we ended up in Ireland with a group of 4 or 5 other families. It was a traditionalist parish in Athlone, which was a long way away. But effectively, we'd landed there. It was like 4 families sailing across the Atlantic Ocean, finding themselves in the new land. Everyone bought their own home. The home was really cheap. You can get a couple of acres for 30.
For the sake of drawing out the good bit, what I'm going to ask you to do, and I'm sorry,
no, please, I need you
to skip the narrative of how you came to your conclusions, and to draw out the conclusions, and so that we can spend more time talking about the conclusions rather than the life story of how you got to those conclusions.
So the conclusions we had, first of all, were we needed to have a far more intimate relationship to sustain our faith with other Christians. We realised that to just stay in the parish where you only see these people, they drive in, they park up, they're worried about when the parking's finished, they're straight off. The priest is still probably hasn't even
maybe have a cup of tea after the mass.
So we found ourselves attempting to do it on our own as families without any help from any church satellite kind of group. So 4 or 5 families had a go at doing exactly what you're saying. And I found that it quickly unravelled because there were 4 or 5 families who were used to being with each other but not intimately, not sharing 4 or 5 days.
So what is the reform that we need to get that intimacy?
My analysis of the challenge would be that Christians who want to live a closer, more early church communal existence, they have to have when I say a charism, they have to have some intimacy. And this is how it was in the early church. You had deacons, you had priests, but these priests had a pastoral role in the lives of their flock.
They lived close together.
Exactly. The priest would be accessible 24/7. He could guide your spiritual life. But I think the intimacy went once Christianity exploded to the point that, to be honest, the factory thing is when you get to millions and millions and millions of Christians, the intimacy is gone.
I think, and that's something that the church struggled with. So in the apostolic times, you would have a bishop who maybe oversaw 30 people in an entire city. That was his parish. That was his diocese. Today, in theory, you have a bishop that might oversee thousands of baptized Christians, of which only hundreds actually only are discipled, or only hundreds even come to church. And I think that that one of the reforms that we need within the diocesan structure is to create Christian communes and then have people connected to those Christian communes in various degrees of intimacy. So you've got a Christian commune where people are living together with a shared purse. They're living life by a shared rhythm, a lay monasticism, and then around where that commune is based, other Christians move into that area.
Historically, that has always been the case with monasteries. The monasteries,
yes,
and they would end up being the centre of a town.
Yeah.
The monastery would be there, and from there it would pull people in who wanted the leadership and the pastoral care.
Yeah.
And this is what I think we need to explore.
Yeah, and I think another thing that you've mentioned, which I agree with, is this idea that the diocese or diocese structures have to recapture the idea of fathers of confession, spiritual fathers, spiritual directors, and that individual Christians have someone to whom they are accountable for their Christian journey. Sure. Someone who's doing that incisive, cutting work at a surgical level to the soul, in the hope of discipling someone to come to the fullness of maturity in Christ.
I must admit, I'm fairly pessimistic on the basis of my own experience with seeing how the various dioceses I've been part of operate. And the one thing that most of the priests are, they're quite territorial and quite suspicious of new ideas, things that might rock the boat. So what I felt led to is to say, I think they're beyond repair as far as being able to influence them to some radical change. But I think the route we followed was from the diocese, there will be people whose faith will lead them into a deeper journey, and that's where we need to meet them outside of the diocese.
It's got to be a coalition of the willing.
Yes.
I agree with you.
Exactly.
It has to be a coalition of the willing. It's never going to come from the bishop, and it's not going to come from the priest.
It isn't going to happen. So this is why I think that we need, and we had the conversation before, where we need to more establish our own
initiatives
and our own communities, our own collectives. But what I experienced two types. There was a collective, which was the Brudahof, where people they were very much acts, kind of the Essene.
Yeah, I've met the Brudahof. I know about the Brudahof.
But then I was more drawn to the of the collective. They would have a communal, a dispersed community living in close proximity, but each family was a standalone unit. Because one thing with the Brudahof was the family was secondary to the unit, to the Brudahof. So they had pool child care, the women would go out to work and make things, and they would see it was almost like something from 1930s Germany. I liked what I saw come back as far as the spirituality, but there were some things there that I thought families weren't meant to participate in at that level. And with the Amish Mennonites that we lived, this is just an example of what happened. They had a church building, and around that church building they had a factory that made wooden furniture. The men who were part of the Brotherhood, they would work in the factory. Everybody would be involved, not just in the spiritual life, but in the working life. And they also met the world in that bulge that we were talking about. They owned a shop, a petrol station, shop and a bakery. My family used to work. So you've got something that isn't just meeting on a spiritual level, but on a practical, it's all encompassing kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. The church has to create a society within society, in which we create our own businesses, we create our own economy, we move in and we coalesce together, celebrate our own feasts, have our own culture, even have distinctive dress. Like, I was discussing with some Brudahof about the distinctive dress, and within the Brudahof there's this debate about should we get rid of the old peasant dress that they wear, and I'm saying no, double down on it actually.
I felt that the modest dress and the being recognisably different to the world is very, very important. If people are straddling the two, and they see you, they will come to you and ask you, who are you?
Or they'll run away.
Or they'll run off. And if they run off, you'll have left an impression on them.
Yeah, exactly. Either way, they didn't ignore you. But the thing is, lots of Christians, when we do the Sunday thing, when we have that spiritual life that's just about meeting on a Sunday, it's clearly not having an impact. It's clearly not discipling people. Catholic parishes are dying right across the Western world, and they are dying not because the spirituality isn't there to feed them. They are dying because the church is structured in a way that the goodness of that spirituality never finds good soil. The earth is not worked.
Yes, interesting, because people are working in the world, and when the seed is sown, to be so involved in the world, watching the world's movies, doing the world's things and all of that, the seed that you're getting from the church, it is just like, I forget what degrees it was, it's very difficult to allow that to have an impact when you're in love with the world and everything the world offers.
I mean, one really radical agenda, you know, that might inspire ideas, you know, is for a bishop to sell off every failing parish, to use the millions of pounds that are raised to buy properties close to to buy properties or tracts of land either close to the cathedral or close to the church that is most efficient for the needs of an active community, and then move the willing into it, and then build it. But I think
I was actually part of that. I'll be very brief.
Go on.
In our journey, I've been to places maybe I shouldn't have been, but I wanted to see what was going on and maybe draw something from it. So we found ourselves with a group of Pius X. At the time, they were schismatic part. They would say they weren't, but they were. But I think they're now more regularised. But what we saw was this group of Catholics, right? What they'd done, they bought a Church of Ireland church, turned it into a Catholic church, homeschool families, about 30 families were all satellite around this one church, and they did what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it, taught what they wanted, and I think that was the model. The dads were doing their own thing. They were working either in the world or home business, but they were living around this place that this group, Pius X, had the money to just say, we're going to buy this Church of Ireland thing. It was no one was, desolate.
I think another thing that every diocese needs to have. There's a couple of things that I think every diocese needs to have. One of them, as well as this community. So let's imagine that a coalition of the willing establish a commune. Within that commune, there has to be dedicated evangelists and a culture of evangelism, regular evangelism, intelligent evangelism, evangelism that isn't just singing songs on a street corner, but evangelism that is adapted to our society today, that engages people in conversation and then draws them into that community. Because one of my kind of criticisms of the Brudahof and the Mennonites is that they've got this bulge, and they have these access points where you can engage, but within their spirituality they are quite bashful about going out and doing street evangelism, by going out and engaging with people in public. They almost dismiss it as being harmful or inaccurate, or I've spoke with the Brudahof.
It's frustrating when that's right. That is the case. They would go out and sing on the street corner. They don't rely. For them, converts isn't as important as raising their children to be members of their community. So they're very successful at one. In fact, I think they're more successful. They gain more what they're doing of what they want than to say, well, look, sorry, you go to school, I'm going to go off and evangelise somebody. I'm sure there is a balance that can be struck based on the early church model. So, and again, as we talked before, the Brudahof and the Amish, they're not doing anything Brudahof and Amish, they're doing things what the early Catholic Christian Apostolic Church used to do. But they preserved them, and this is why it's worthy analysing their failures, some of the points that could be adapted, but I really do think that in these days, in these latter days, if I could say, when things are looking very, very black, that Christians, and I mentioned to you before, should think, if they are ever going to move next to another Christian who they can tolerate. My problem was, I expected everybody to be like me and I would be quite demanding. Now I think if you can trust somebody and say, I'm here for you when I need you, that's huge in this day and age. And that would be enough. So,
but I mean, living in a commune is not the easy option. Living in a commune is a difficult option. Living in community is not an easy option. But all Christian values come to their fullest expression when Christians live in community. I think that something else that you've touched on that every diocese really needs is either a homeschooling network or a Christian school that will teach a Christian education.
My brother's doing that. What he's doing, he's starting a satellite school. He's a teacher. He's going to leave his job. He's going to do it for free, and homeschooling families come twice a week to them, and they can. The church hall is one good thing. The diocese is they still have the facilities. You can say, Father, we've got some people here. Can we do it? So you've got homeschooled families who are going to come to the diocese, going to be taught, going to be assisted in their education to free them up from that responsibility.
And that also helps to protect our children from the secularization and the liberal progressive ideology that's now being very forcefully pushed onto children. You know, I think another, because I think schools, I think a commune and forming around a community are very important. I think that Christians need to have they need to have dedicated evangelists and a culture of evangelism. They need to have parish priests, pastors who are intimately connected, spiritual fathers who are intimately woven into that community, so that they're not this strange authority figure who you see once in a while, but someone who does feel like a friend or a father, someone that you can go to and, I've got this problem, can we pray about it, can we talk about this spiritual issue?
I discovered this, and I was talking to a priest who wanted to do that, but because the diocesan structure, they don't have enough priests for there to be any priest, unless he's from a particular charism, to be released from his job to then give himself to you. But in America, there was one who was a black priest, and he said, I'm leaving, I'm with you, and he went with this homeschool group of people, and they went off to somewhere and did whatever they did, but very few priests would do it. But monks are more they seem to appreciate that a bit more, because quite often some of the groups that I've been involved with, there would be brothers and sisters from various Franciscans of the Renewal, a variety of these kind of people who would come down and spend time with the children, give them some catechesis, play with them. They would see a young smiley nun instead of an old nun who doesn't want to know them, and those kind of things could all play a big part. I mean, it's a very varied thing, but I think that what I was
it's got to become a living organism.
Exactly. But I was fed up talking about things, and I would talk to my friends for years, and the years would go by, and after we'd finished moaning, we wouldn't really have much time to thinking about, well, what are we going to do?
But how can you do it unless the structures are there? And that's why it's important to create that community, that intimate commune, and maybe particularly those in the Catholic structures should think about moving in around the monasteries, or setting up their own communes.
The big problem there, Bob, is that most fathers at the moment, because of the economic burden they have, they don't move very, very well. They actually stay where they are. But the people that I'd known were more wanting to live a radical life and willing to live a life not of poverty, but a life of radical frugality.
Yeah.
And so what they did, we cashed our chips in here. We took a small amount of equity. We found a place where we could buy the maximum tract of land, and we would live in a place where you'd go and dig the peat, and you'd go and you'd live a fairly life like that. But unless people are actually willing to radically alter their lives from the safety and the security to give your life to the gospel, very few people are able to do that.
But that's why moving in around a commune can help, because there are communities that already exist where this is happening. So if we coalesce, because the thing is, one of the reasons why the diocesan system, the parish system, is failing is because it's spread too thin. And we're trying to maintain buildings that we can't maintain just for the sake of maintaining a building.
Yeah, they're listed and they say
and let them go. What we need to do is we need to consolidate. When Christians consolidate, then we will be more effective. Because when you're in a war and you're losing that war because you're defending too many spaces, when you consolidate, you make your chance of defending those spaces stronger, and by consolidating, it means that you create this energy from which you can punch outwards.
I think you've now brought us to where we need to identify the first step, is the consolidation. Because from that consolidation come. But it won't happen until you consolidate, because we'll keep sliding and sliding.
So every bishop needs to identify places within his diocese to consolidate. And we've got huge amounts of money locked into buildings. Let's just sell them, bring the community together, and start doing real discipleship. I would say another thing that needs to happen, particularly within the Catholic structures, is that the church needs to take mental health seriously. Mental health issues, I have noted, are very are disproportionate in parish systems. I've worked in I've been in lots of parishes. I've seen lots of parishes. There's a lot of mental health issues, a lot of depression, a lot of people borderline on the sort of fringes of society, and they,
with young girls, it's epidemic portion.
But if we became a place where we look after our own community, by employing Christians who've got the training in psychology and counselling, and start caring for the mental health of our own parishes, and and building those people up, we then might be in a position where we can bless everyone around us. But it's also about taking the people you've got and moving them forward. And the reality is that lots of people with mental health issues are coming to the church because inside the church they find people that will tolerate them. They will find people that will make time for them.
Get the sign of peace, which is maybe something they never have for the whole week.
Yeah, they might get some. Yeah, exactly. And maybe someone will talk to them over a cup of tea and make them feel human. But we need to take mental health as a serious thing, so that every diocese has a counsellor or a psychologist diocese, and anyone who's struggling in various different things, maybe a couple is struggling in their marriage, or a child is struggling because they've received this kind of some kind of problem, teenage years, depression, and that we've got the means to help our own.
What do you think of this? Not because I'm quite pessimistic, I must admit, but I have an eternal hope, but pessimistic as far as what's going on at the moment. That I've done this before, where I've said in my mind, when you daydream, I think, this needs to happen, and this needs to happen, and this needs to happen, and it should happen, but it's not going to happen.
Unleash the saints, just unleash the Father.
So what I'm left with is identifying things that need to happen on a macro level that aren't going to happen, or starting to think more on the micro level, the bottom up, as opposed to top down.
I think it will come bottom up.
Yeah, I think
it will start bottom up, and then when it's seen to start working and bearing good fruit, then it will start to come down.
What do you think of this? I was just bear with me just for a few minutes, because I think it illustrated something that touched me. There was a group called the Neo-Catechumenate Way, and they are very, very big in South America. They're quite, I don't know if they're liberal, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, two men were walking down the street, and they came into our church. There were two Spanish guys, and they just said, can we see the priest? And the priest wasn't particularly interested, because obviously there's some charism. Basically, the Neo-Catechumenate Way, they sent 80 pairs of people who didn't know each other on a bus with no money, one-way ticket, and just to live for 1 week, and then come back and share what had happened with them to their community. So they're building structures where they send people out, bring them in, and all of those kind of things. But going back to this, what can we put into effect personally that might bring about some of the things that we hope to happen on a bigger scale? What we're doing here right now is a good step.
So a personal thing.
Yeah, please.
And I think you've probably done a lot of them.
Yeah.
One is get involved in the homeschooling movement.
Yeah.
Two is move in near to a Christian commune, a Christian community, a deliberate Christian community, like the Brudahof, like the Mennonites, like the Antioch community that lives in Acton.
Okay.
Move in and around these different groups.
Yeah.
That's another thing. The other thing is, we've got to stop wasting our time and our energies on things that are failing.
Yes.
We've got to recognise failure for what it is.
Walk away instead of. We could spend the rest of our lives doing something that's going to have no effect.
Yeah, which, let's face it, lots of parishes are.
Yes.
I've been to plenty of parishes where they say, their idea of evangelism is, well, we've got a building here. Yeah. And that's literally their understanding of evangelism is, well, there's the building here if people want to come to it. Yeah. What a load of rubbish. It's kind of like that kind of spirituality. We've also got to cultivate a more muscular spirituality within ourselves. Because one of the things that the church is really struggling with is a lack of masculinity. Yes. Is a lack of masculinity. Horrific. You go to any church, it's usually 1 to 4 in terms of the male-female ratio. And the reason for that is if you have a feminine spirituality, you will only speak to women. And even then only to some. Yeah. What we need is a masculine spirituality that when a lad from a council estate walks in, he doesn't cringe with embarrassment. But he thinks, actually, this is a brotherhood, these are a body of people, these are people that I can get involved with.
Who would die for me.
And whom I am willing to die for.
Exactly. I think it's making commitment to people who you might not like on a personal level, because there's so many personalities in the world. Lots of Christians say, well, I'm more cliquey with people I feel comfortable with, but I think we need to grow up and say, me liking you is not the most important thing. Me trusting you is the most important thing, and you trusting me and us working together is far more solid a basis than whether I like you, because if I like you, we're probably going to fall out.
Yeah.
So those kind of things I think are very important. But you mentioned, I think one of the bars is if you homeschool, generally speaking, you're open to a more radical
Vision.
countercultural,
yeah.
Exactly. So those things seem to be growing,
Yeah.
and I think it's an inevitability that it will continue to grow as the demonic situation of the education.
Yeah, the state is literally trying to propagate its ideology onto our children.
I think the Holy Spirit needs to be brought in here, and we need to.
Well, I think he's already here.
Be more responsive to the things that he's already making happen.
Yeah.
So as more and more families choose to homeschool, they get more connected because they have to, because they can't homeschool in isolation.
Yeah.
And then they build up a relationship with each other. They reinforce their faith. So I think the homeschool movement is actually performing very, very well.
Yeah.
And I think now that lots of people are saying, well, look, maybe we can help you with your, like the Muslims have a madras.
Yeah.
They have on a Saturday.
Yeah.
That there are Christians who are willing to assist the parents who are open to life, because they've normally got tiny little children.
Well, we've got Sunday schools, but Sunday schools just become this let's tell a Bible story nonsense. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real discipleship. Because what children need to be raised is they need to be raised to think of their identity as Christian, to have a knowledge of Christian history, to have a clear understanding of what are Christian values.
And to articulate their faith would help.
Yes, exactly. To be able to articulate those values, and to be able to articulate and know what is the Christian vision of the world, the Christian vision of life. And what we've done is we've replaced all of that with nothing but the sprinklings of religiosity. Let's learn a little Bible story here. Let's learn a little about, like, discipleship within so many diocesan structures is at an all-time low. And parishes are dying for it. And what needs to happen is there needs to be a consolidation. There needs to be the establishment of a living community, a living organism that is alive to doing things differently and new.
Sure.
Yeah, not bound to the structure just because the structure is there. We're not talking about getting rid of bishops. We're not talking about getting rid of priests. We're not talking about getting rid of deacons. What we're talking about is getting rid of the organisation of parish and dioceses in the way that it is presently at, and all the ills of the culture that have now become embedded within it.
Could it be twinned with actually saying, well, look, we know you will continue doing what you're doing, and the sacraments are available, etc., etc. But as far as us relying on you to help us, we've given up, because it's not going to happen unless we row out into the deep and establish those things.
I am confident that there will always be priests and bishops willing to get involved.
Yes.
There'll always be priests and bishops that will see the vision and get the vision and work with the vision.
Generally speaking, they wouldn't be diocesan priests and bishops. These would be from these various religious
societies.
Societies. They seem very, very much, and I think this is the fruit of the Holy Spirit, because they're growing as well.
Yeah.
These kind of good, and they're the ones who actually
Thank you.
These are the people who actually are looking for the families. They're looking for the lost sheep. They have a what's the word for? They see themselves in the eyes of the good shepherd looking for the lost sheep, and they will approach you and they'll say, look at you, there's 6 or 7 of you, I can see you wearing second-hand clothes, and you obviously, you look like you had a rough time. Come and tell me how it's going. Those kind of things, as opposed to you go to the parish and basically there are no children, no children on a Sunday. Most of the people are either, they're not British either. There's a dying out kind of thing.
Coming back to this question about what the individual can do, I would say that it is better to connect with people that are already doing this, rather than necessarily start it from the beginning yourself, unless there's enough of you to do it at the same time, because usually these little initiatives will flounder and fail. It is much better to identify where it's already happening and to put your weight and your energy into what is already going on. And I actually think that Christians need to be willing to move.
I do.
Christians need to be willing to move. We need to see that this idea of the parish system, that because one of the problems within the parish system is we're encouraged to live like salt and light out in the world. And then you come back on a Sunday and you're meant to live your life quietly in such a way that impresses everyone. But the reality is it doesn't, because you don't look any different, you don't sound any different, you don't do any different, you are not different until you look different, sound different, and do different.
Yeah. No, I'm into that.
And that's the problem with lots of churches, is we like to talk the rhetoric of being different
Yeah.
without any real thinking. What does different look like? Well, it actually looks different.
Yeah,
It actually does different. It actually sounds different.
And you've got to be able to resist that pride in you, because out of 10 people you meet, 9 might take the mickey out.
Yeah.
So let's say we're in Waterford, my wife wears a head cover and my children have all got long dresses, and I'm wandering around and I don't know what on earth I look, and I can see people going. In fact, the only places we did fit in were in the diocese, because we had a big family and we dressed modestly and we homeschooled. We were the weirdos within our own. But within the Amish Mennonites, there was a context. Oh, you know them, do you? Ah, now I can put you in a place, but not as a Catholic. That was something that scared them. But some of the sisters from the Franciscans of the Renewal, I thought they came up, they were talking, and it was like, what a great vision you could have of this all being brought together. But can I just say this, Bob? I think you have said the most important thing, when to kick this off, is to say, are you willing to move closer to a Christian friend? Is he willing to move? Are you willing to
coalesce?
Sacrifices to be more available to each other and your family?
How many Christians, and one easy step for people that maybe don't have the finances to move, is how many Christians are on your street? How many Christians are in your neighborhood? How often do we live together?
Drive, just hit me. We used to drive an hour and a half to see people, but we make sure we do it a couple of times a week.
Yeah.
Because we homeschooled and I was working from home. If you homeschool, it gives you the freedom to start to see each other more. Because the wife is, because what you have in most families, mum's working, dad's working, 2 separate places, children are in school.
Yeah.
There is no time apart from the weekend, and come the weekend, everybody wants to relax, enjoy themselves, and they don't want to do it. But homeschoolers, the dynamic of their life means their life, that is their life, to visit and to have people come and visit them, and from that you can say, Father, will you give a talk? And if there is a good priest, he'll come. So you might have 2 or 3 families. I remember when we were in Ireland, we had about 7 or 8 families came round. All the boys were playing with swords and shields and things like that. The priest said the mass in the barn. We had a big old barn, squaw bales and things like that. Great big meal, shared thing, bit of confession, and at the end of the day, everyone was drawn together from that experience. And that for me is where I'd love to be back at.
I think I agree. Like we've got to offer a different vision of society, and obviously you've got to regulate that in such a way as to avoid abuses or cultic behaviour or controlling behaviour. Like that is a principle of any Christian commune. Any genuinely Christian commune will not be about control. A spiritual father can only advise you; they can't tell you what to do. Like within a commune, it's kind of like it has got to be opt-in, not opt-out, kind of like.
Because so many of these things go sour so quick. There's almost an inevitability of some of these ad hoc, we're going to start a very intense small group. And
shouldn't be.
The devil comes in, you haven't got any, well, maybe it's a bad priest. Maybe there are bad priests.
There are bad priests
who get involved in the whole thing, and the devil gets in. So that's why I like more this diffused, family-centred, but with the centre being where the religious brothers or
whereas I kind of prefer the Brudahof way of doing it, whereas the family, which is the family, is secondary to the unit. One thing that I would say also needs to occur in the dioceses, the diocesan structure, is that Christians need to take their own security seriously. Because we live in an age. So, for example, I'm going to use Nisa Hussein. Nisa Hussein was Nisa Hussein and his family were Muslims who became Christians. Their whole family became Christians. They had Muslim neighbours. They lived in a Muslim area. Everyone was, they had friends. They obviously had their normal sort of ins and outs with people, just like everybody does. But then when they became Christian, that's when the persecution started. People who were their friends started persecuting them. And what happened was the bishop washed his hands of them, because it was too politically sensitive to point out that Muslims were persecuting Christians in Bradford. And the Christian community is so insipidly weak, and so lacking in masculinity, that the Christian community couldn't offer them any defence. They went to the police didn't want to get involved, just told them to move out, as if that's acceptable. The police, that was their response, is, well, you being here is a problem, so leave. And so we're going to see more of that. We're going to see more of that. And I think that when you get a commune, a Christian community coalescing, they as well as all the evangelism and the discipleship and the education and providing for their own health care and mental health and these other things that we've mentioned and the spiritual fathers, they also have to take security seriously. How to look after one another. You know, like, and that might mean just training the community in martial arts so that, you know, Christians become known as those group where they've got the disproportionate number of black belts in taekwondo and kung fu. And
what do you think about this? Because I was drawn to leaving cities, leaving big urban areas, because I think the benefits are, I think living in creation is a good thing to raise a family. Having farm animals is good because it builds a relationship between father, son, mum and daughter. The farm is a great teaching and binding thing. And I think that cities now, I mean, we're taught as Christians to avoid occasions of sin. Now, on a hot day in a city, young men, you know, we have to be cautious about the influences a city can have on our own spiritual life, knowing that we're weak. So I find that it's far more, the evidence seems to be, from what I've seen, people who take it seriously saying, you know what, it's a boiling hot day, maybe I'm not going to take my 16-year-old son to the beach. Maybe we're going to go off and do something different, but just to be more aware that there are things that Christians prudently should avoid without suddenly hiding in a bunker. And I think living in the countryside helps. If you can move into the countryside, move out of the city, because the city's full of danger, full of violence, full of bad, impressionable things, that your family growth in their spiritual and the unity with you is gonna struggle with.
I think that I think there are advantages to living in the country, and I think that it is, everything you're saying is really valid. However, I think that what we're talking about can also work in urban areas.
I agree.
Because if you coalesce into a local community, you can start to change that culture. If you're the ones that own all the shops, you can shut those shops down on a Sunday. You know, if you're the one that live in that area predominantly and someone sticks up an advert that's rude or blasphemous or indecent, you can start to go, actually, we don't want that in our area.
Good point.
You know,
that's a really good point.
You can influence the culture around you, but you've got to have a more robust spirituality that says, actually, no, we don't want to see that. We, you know, like.
You know what, you've just turned another light that had dimmed for quite a long time. It's not necessarily what the parish will do for you, it's what you will do to the parish. I remember Mother Teresa saying that love is a fruit never out of season. There's no limit to how much you can give. Now, quite often as Christians, we're sitting here waiting, saying, who's going to help us? We are the help. And when we realise we're the help, we're the
But we need to help one another.
Exactly.
We need to own this struggle. The thing is, we can't turn the church into an NGO. What is the point of helping the poor of the parish? What is the point of helping the single mother who's a non-Christian if we're not helping the single mother in the parish? What is the point of helping those with mental illness outside of the parish who are not Christian if we're not helping those who are struggling with mental health issues inside the parish? It's kind of like, you've got skills, I've got skills, my skills might not be the same as your skills, but when you need me to use my skills to bless you, I do so, and vice versa, and then this brother does the same, and then we all start sharing our skills with one another. And then by doing that, we might create some kind of structure that is strong enough that not only does it look after the Christian community, but then when we identify someone who's on the edge of that Christian community who could need our help, we're in a better position to bless them. But how can we bless other people if we don't bless our own?
You know, that goes back to what I'd witnessed and evidenced in the Amish Mennonite community. I mentioned to you that if a woman was 6 weeks from having a baby, there would always be a hot meal brought, bang on 6 o'clock. There was a rota around the whole community. If somebody needed help building an extension, the church would come and help them. You didn't have to go and pay outsiders. You knew if you had to go away for a week, there would be people who you could trust who would look after your children. The whole of that community, like you were just saying, is you can imagine being able to put your shoulders down, relax, and have people you can trust who will assist you when you need it, and for them not to gripe about it.
But one of the problems with the Mennonite community is that they are not, as it were, porous enough to evangelize and draw people in.
I agree with you.
The Mennonites have a problem where they have to delineate the bloodlines to marry. So that they're not marrying people who are too close to their bloodline. And the Huttites, for example, are an example of a community where they're literally they're collapsing inward because they haven't been evangelizing
They're living
enough
in an island.
outward.
They're living in an
Yeah.
island, and you can see that
We don't
deficiency
exactly
is really
that's the
kicking in.
danger of setting up a community like this. You've always got to be drawing in fresh blood. It's always.
But you know what, Bob? The things that I just articulated you about the help, those things used to happen in Glasgow tenement blocks. They used to happen in cities when communities still recognised each other, knew who they were, who they would live in the same street. They would raise their children together. They'd know. Nowadays we live in streets where to rent.
Yeah.
You don't. No one. People are scared to make a commitment because everything's so fast. You don't know where you're going. But I think it's more to this idea of community can be in the centre of the worst city. It can be in the countryside. It can be absolutely anywhere. But it's something that comes from you making the first offer of commitment. And I like to say to people, you know where I am. If you ever need me, 24/7, give me a ring.
And it's got to. But those communities work when you've got common values,
Yes.
common beliefs.
Yes.
Like, and a common sense of purpose.
Yes.
And that is something that lots of diocesan lack. They have no vision.
Yep.
The bishop is offering no vision. He's offering no direction. He's not saying this is what we're going to do, this is what we're about. He's not drawing people into a common purpose. He's not drawing people into a common set of values. You know, with the Catholic Church, the Catholic dioceses have become characterizations of themselves.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we're pro-life. Well, you don't build an entire civilization on being pro-life. That is one aspect of a much wider picture.
Sure.
And it's like we've got to offer a fuller vision to society.
Yes.
And we can only do that when we offer an alternate society itself.
As you said about the bishops, exhorting people to a standard
Is what
that
they should be doing.
that Christ has laid down.
Yeah.
And then encouraging them when they fail is something that, for me, it was like, I never heard that, anything like that on the diocesan level.
And galvanizing them to a purpose.
Yes, yes.
Like the Christian community should be known as a community that you don't mess with. They should be known as a community that are charitable. They should be known as a community that are generous. They should be known as a community that love one another. They should be known as a community of modesty. They should be known as a community of virtue. They should be known as a community of forgiveness. But yet we're not known for any of those things. What are we known for? We are known for people standing on street corners and shouting at everybody. We are known for scandalous, abuses. Like, and part of that is just because the media only wants to talk to us when something goes wrong.
Sure.
But it's actually because, but part of it is actually because there's nothing actually really positive being done in such a way that it stands out. Like the Brudahof stand out.
Yes.
People know about the Brudahof. People know about the Amish.
Yeah.
What are the Amish known for? The Amish are known for building barns and stuff like that. So, but they're known for something different.
Yes.
And the Christian community at this moment is not known for something different because you can't do Christianity once a week. You can't do Christianity once a week with a plus meeting in the middle of the week.
Sure.
That is not how Christianity was ever meant to work. It's not how the values are meant to work.
Yes.
You've got to do Christianity on a 7-day-a-week basis. And it starts with doing it with other Christians.
Yes.